America, what are the nightmare scenarios? Many would say that our foreign policy, our standing in the world, our national security internally would be at great threat. But I have somebody here who's going to be able to dig down deep and give us the real skinny on what we would be looking toward as a new America under in Kamala's regime, if you will, in her White House, her administration. Joining me is Walid Phares. And Walid Phares is an amazing, amazing man. He has so much background because he comes from the Middle East originally, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that. He's written many, many books. I have several of them, and I'm digging into his current one on Iran right now. But he is a top TV foreign policy analyst. He's a terrorism expert. He gives testimony to Congress. He advises Congress on policy and, well, just a little bit about everything about foreign policy, the Middle East, the Arab world, Israel, terrorism. He does it all. And he predicts so many things, which we'll go into as well. So his level of predicting accurately is spot on. And so that's why I want him to tell us his predictions about the White House if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz take the White House. So thank you for joining me, Walid. One of the first things I want to ask you is just what is your nightmare scenario for a Kamala Harris-Tim Walz presidency?
Elizabeth, let me just say before I answer that this is not just wild predictions. I have published about projections into the predecessors. I have predicted that things will happen with the Obama administration already in 2008 and 9. I had a book also about how ISIS would be unleashed. I had a chapter about the Muslim Brotherhood who will be unleashed, and most importantly, about the signing of the Iran deal. I had another book in 2020, and the title is very revealing. It's the choice between the foreign policy of Donald Trump and the foreign policy of Obama and Biden. Now, with you, what we're going to do is just trying to do some predictions and projections into what would the world look like, what America would look like if we're going to have a Harris administration. And my role basically is to focus on the national security of America and also the disaster that could happen in the region. And I could go on for the whole hour. I don't want to do that, but I can summarize it as follows. We're going to have a series of catastrophes in the world. And the role of a third administration for Obama, because that's what's going to happen at the end of the day, is going to create further problems, first in Ukraine, Russia, but more importantly now for us, between Israel and Hamas, the Islamic regime in Iran and the 4 countries they control, all the way to Yemen, to Lebanon, to Iraq. I mean, you're going to give me not just 1 hour with maybe multiple times to appear and describe it to you, but also at home. And let me say that I am an expert on foreign policy, but my concern is that our homeland security will be at risk, specifically the consequences of what we have done or not done on the southern border. That's the biggest tableau. That's the biggest image that I would summarize it with.
It's scary.
Yeah.
I don't mind saying the word scary because it doesn't mean that we lack courage. It doesn't mean that we do not have hope. But it's scary that things that we cannot control directly would be unleashed upon this country and indeed upon the world, because I feel that we have a personal responsibility when we take irresponsible actions and indeed inactions, and they affect millions of people around the globe. So we do have a responsibility, and I don't believe that other than Donald Trump taking the White House, that we are going to be fulfilling a responsible foreign policy. And I also believe that, as you said, the catastrophes that are coming because of this wide open border policy are terrifying. I say that the next 9/11 in America is the Biden-Harris 9/11. It doesn't mean if it's 2 years from now, it's still because of what has happened on their watch. So why don't you just take me, well, firstly, why don't you give us a quick background of your Lebanese heritage, like my husband's, and how you came to America and, just a little background.
Elizabeth, my story basically is the story of fighting for freedom. I didn't emigrate to America for a job. I didn't come here to make money or to go to Hollywood. I actually was fine in Lebanon, the last free part of Lebanon, because Lebanon has been assaulted by the Assad regime, by the Islamic regime in Iran, by the Hezbollah, of course, and Hamas, have been omnipresent for 15 years in
And
Lebanon.
the
My
PLO
experience
and the PLO.
and the PLO and all the organizations sent by Gaddafi and Saddam. I mean, the whole tabbouleh, since you like Lebanese food, it has all these little pieces. I experienced this in a 15 years war, not two, not three, not five, 15. I've seen it all. I've heard all the ideologies. I even published while in Beirut in Arabic and in French and in English. So I know more or less when you see the jihadi, let me call him beast in front of you, you would know where that path is going. And they destroyed Iraq and they destroyed Syria. They actually seized power in Iran. That's why I always call it Islamic regime in Iran and obviously in Lebanon. I have that experience. So when the last free area of Lebanon in 1990, that's why I left in 1990. Many of my friends and relatives left way before. I stayed till we had a piece of free land to, I was a journalist, I was a lawyer, I was a writer, so just to make sure. And from Lebanon, I tried to open the eyes of Western media. That could be a book. And I was terrified how the Western media even then had no idea about what was going on because of the propaganda. I landed here in Miami and I started my life again. I had lost everything during that war, house, office, cars, everything. I came here with zero. And a story of immigrants. I started to build my life, rebuild my life here. And it is in two parts. The first part was in the 90s, where I served as a professor at an American university and a little bit briefing Congress and having some media coverage. But it was really 9/11 that put me on the national scene because members of Congress, of the media, even of the administration, the Bush administration at the time, we were hit. 3,000 Americans were killed. So they wanted to know more from experts on jihadism, from experts on the Khomeini's, ideologies of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this is how I started a 20 years career as a commentator on TV, an author, a briefer of governments. I have briefed. So I know basically the difficulty in a war of ideas. You have us, you, myself, all those who are in the media who want to try to awaken the American public about the dangers, but we are confronted in a war of ideas by a huge propaganda machine. So we have been part of this war of ideas, and unfortunately, we're not yet winning it, but there is a younger generation that is more aware now than ever before.
I think so. I'm not sure I ever understand why Americans and Israelis even fall for the propaganda. I, to me, there's just a worldview in that subset of people, and especially in the halls of power. I wonder how much of that misunderstanding is truly misunderstanding, or if it's insincerity and propaganda in and of itself. Because how could we not understand the intentions of Iran, the intentions of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, Syria, Assad, the PLO, the PA? How can we not understand it? We know what they say when they're behind closed doors or when they're speaking in Arabic or Farsi or whatever. We know what their intentions are, their stated intentions. We don't take it seriously. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, does Kamala Harris, is she pretending to affirm Israel's sovereign right to defend itself? Or is she really just doing that because the vast majority of Americans clearly support American support for Israel for many, many different reasons? And this is opposed because she's willing to go any way necessary, especially in the Biden administration and for the election. But will we see the gloves off and a different story come January 20th?
you know the term, the eye of the hurricane. So you have two walls, and in between those two walls, you have a calm, serenity, and then the second wall will hit you. That's where the team, the Obama, Biden, Kamala Harris is right now. And with their advisors, with their academics, with people who have been influenced by that, regime propaganda and brotherhood propaganda. We are in the last 40 days before the elections. And in those 40 days, whatever speech is developed, you have to go back and check it in history. The position of Madam Kamala Harris is not now. Of course, we're going to equip Israel, quote unquote, with everything they need, right? But they don't say how. They don't say that you have to actually be working with your allies, the Israelis, and some Arab allies as well, that her administration has been also pushing down, not just Israel. You have the Saudis, you have UAE, you have also the Iranian opposition. Nothing. They have never been
That
supported.
blows my mind. And I want to pause on that for just a moment because I want to go to their position on supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia and their situation in the UAE and for the resistance to the Islamic regime in Iran. Those are so important. Let me just focus for a moment on Kamala and uh, her her abilities, her knowledge, her wisdom or understanding, her sincerity, deep state, globalist, etc. I mean, there's so many components to this. Does she really like Israel? Does she care about Israel? Does she really want to defend Israel? Right now, if Kamala Harris could do anything, and January 20th is going to be a big test, right? But on day one, what would she do with regard to Israel and Hamas if the war is not over by then? What do you think?
Let's go straight at it because we don't have time to go around. Kamala Harris, she becomes the president of the United States. She's going to be at the absolute opposite of what Donald Trump has done. Absolute opposite. And it's not like a projection from my mind. It's the reality of things. She was part of an administration. That administration on day one, if we recall in 2021, I think it was end of January or early February, what was their opening? The opening was to delist the Houthi terrorist organization. I mean, on week one, they delisted it, transforming the whole South Red Sea into an area of influence for the Tehran regime. That would be your first one. And then second, in between that time and August of 2021. So it shows you they have a plan, they will apply the plan, they have program, they have individuals who are in charge as we speak right now to deliver a policy that would be, a policy, apologist policy for the foes of the United States. But let me say one thing. They have pressured our ally, not just the Israelis. The Israelis is a normal story. We know about
Of
it.
course they pressure Israelis.
Bibi Netanyahu should not form the gun, etc. But our allies, the Saudis, they were fighting a war against the Houthis. The Saudis and the UAE were supporting them. And we told them, if you continue that fight, we are not going to give you ammunition. We're not going to give you anything. But the most important thing they've achieved in 2021, the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan and the transfer of power to the Taliban. So all these matters, like
and she
being
was the
close
last man in the room, or the last person in the room, right?
Yeah, now we can go and talk about what was her actual role, but her policy is already predetermined. So she's not going to have a new Kamala Harris policy.
And
it's already done.
It's an Obama policy too.
It's the Obama policy. It's the teams of Obama. It's the people who actually created and launched and managed the Iran deal. The biggest threat against Western civilization and our foreign policy has been the Islamic regime transaction. Let me repeat this 2 times, transaction with the Obama administration that caused a complete change in our foreign policy since practically Bush left the White House. That was the
I'd say since
Trump,
George Washington.
well, about.
but truly the Iran deal did start it all. Biden continued that inexplicably with an interruption of power and credibility. by the Trump administration. And then we
Right.
would have a continuation of this Obama, Biden, Biden, Harris, Harris, Walz, um, foreign policy with regard to the Middle East and the entire world. But let's just focus on the Middle East. So we've got the appeasement of Iran
Mhm.
transactionally, giving them money, opening the door up to a potential nuclear threat in the region. Then we delisted the Houthis and took them off of that list, which, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Trump put them on the terror list? Is it called the terror watch
Absolutely.
list? Okay.
The actual U.S. Treasury and State Department terrorists. They are
Terror
two
list.
terrorists.
Right.
Yes.
And that to me was a betrayal of the Saudi Arabian government. Did they take that as a betrayal when they removed the Houthis?
Absolutely. This is a hit against a government, right? We have had in the past a lot of criticism, but Mohammed bin Salman has been our super ally in reversing the Islamist jihadi policies alone. He was threatened. He was even threatened to be killed by the jihadists who are working with ISIS, or jihadists who are working with the Muslim Brotherhood, and by the Iran Islamic regime. So he was helping us in Yemen and in reforming. Remember, President Trump went to Riyadh. I was very close to these moments during the campaign. I was his foreign policy advisor, one of them at least. And there, Trump told him, go after the jihadists, go after them. And he told them, we need to defeat that ideology. We need you to form a joint counterterrorism force. And who was leading this? MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, and his ally, MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed of the UAE. Formidable, plus Egypt, also Sisi. They all went after the Islamists and the jihadists. And the Biden administration, which is a stretch of the Obama administration, what did they do? They abandoned each one of these Arab allies, and they doubly abandoned Israel. Let me give you a projection very quick. It's scary. This one's going to scare. I am projecting that goal one, target one, is going to be the Bibi administration, the Netanyahu government. If they win, I can guarantee you it's not anymore a question of projection. They're going to bring it down and bring other people, other players. Target number two, they're going to call for an international reconciliation, what have you, conference between Israel and Hamas. And then Hamas will be removed from the terror list. Could you imagine that? And it's not something out of sight. That's what they've done with the Houthis. I don't want to scare you more, but I will. And the next is going to be to negotiate with Hezbollah in Lebanon and ultimately remove Hezbollah from the terror list. So the policy of a Kamala Harris administration, which is the third term or the fourth term of the Obama team, is going to be to normalize, legitimize all these jihadi organizations, claiming and saying that this is the best way. That's what they've done before, but this time it's going to be at a catastrophic level, and re-sign a much worse deal with the Khomeini's regime in Iran. So the difference is so stark, so deep, that it is really going to be a catastrophe if that happens.
Almost saying night and day just seems too pitifully weak because it's universes apart. And it's really based upon worldview. These are moral choices that are being made. When you undermine your friends, and this is something that bothers me deeply. I believe that America is perceived by many in the world to be hypocritical and to be sort of a disloyal friend that you cannot rely upon, feckless, right? You can't rely upon the United States. So we have Donald J. Trump in, he's, Abraham Accords, he's making
Mhm.
things happen. He's putting the embassy in Jerusalem. By the way, there was no massive intifada. None of the nightmare scenarios happened. He's working with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Morocco, Sudan, the Abraham Accords. Um, these governments seem to be very, very aggressively desiring to westernize as much as a Muslim nation can. Well, we'll take whatever we can get because
Yeah, yeah,
it's a
I
heck of
agree.
a lot more waste. And by the way, it's another thing where the Obama administration attacks um, Saudi Arabia for, say, the the alleged execution of a journalist. Okay, I am not for executing journalists, but what I'm saying is Iran goes into Europe and America searching out to execute Americans and Europeans, and not a word is said. And how many journalists are being executed in Iran, and women and little girls, young women raped? The contrast, what I do not understand is, well, no, I do understand it. I believe, I'm a Christian. It's about evil, but it's a worldview issue, and we would be putting back into the White House two people that have a worldview that is fundamentally out of step with a biblical Judeo-Christian worldview and a Western civilizational worldview. And Iran is on the side of a Harris-Walls worldview. They share the same worldview. But to go back to the point, I diverted a little bit there. What I wanted to talk about is loyalty. It crushes me to think that those Iranians who are fighting the regime think, why don't Americans care about us? Or
Mhm.
Saudi Arabians who are trying to transform their society, and then we backslap them and say, no, you can't fight against the
Mhm.
Houthis. We'll take them off. How do they feel about us? And the guy on the street and the guy in office or ruling the nations.
Oh, absolutely. This is a gigantic subject. Let me start with one point, which is the most dangerous: the Obama etc. policy with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And if you want, we can focus on, there is a reason other than the ideological. But let me start by saying we have literally abandoned the Iranian people since day one of the Obama administration. Period. It's like Biden started with the Houthis, but don't we remember that in June of 2009, former President Obama delivered a letter to the Grand Ayatollah of the Islamic Republic, and in which he said, I have nothing to do with this revolution. It was called the Green Revolution, against you. This was a message to the regime that you can slaughter, you could do whatever you want with the Iranians. And the Iranians demonstrators, we still have it on video, would be saying, Obama, Obama, are you with us or are you with them? It was like a scandal almost. But what the Biden administration has done has even surpassed. As we speak right now, there is a journalist, an American national, who also has the German passport, who's in Los Angeles. He was targeted by a assassination attack here and in Los Angeles, and he has been kidnapped. So he's not arrested in Iran. He has been kidnapped from the Gulf, which is protected by us, taken to Iran, put in jail, tortured for 3 years, condemned to death. His name is Jimmy Sharmad, and he has not been included in last year's deal that the Biden administration was talking about, $6 billion. We recovered individuals who, thank God, that have been recovered, but they have nothing to do with bringing awareness. This gentleman had a website and was bringing awareness to the Iranian people. Till now, he has not been recovered. That's a betrayal in my view. And from here on, I would say, to connect with the other point I made, that was also a betrayal of Israel, of the Saudis, of the Iranian opposition, of the Lebanese. Since we have some links here between our families and Lebanese, the Lebanese have tried 3 times through the Cedars Revolution in 2005 and another revolution in 2019 to get rid of the Hezbollah control. We send our diplomats not to say a word about the Lebanese, who many of their politicians were assassinated, but to regulate, how much Hezbollah will make from a maritime deal on oil. I mean, it's like completely out of control, which brings me to the point really I want to make here. The Iran deal is not just an ideological choice by some elite in the United States. It's a money transaction. It is a financial transaction. The devil is inside this transaction. We have promised in 2015, the Obama administration, to send $150 billion. That's something everybody knows about. Now, when we send those billions of dollars to the regime, to the Islamic regime, what do you think they're going to do with it, with that money? Are they going to reform in Iran? No. Are they going to help the middle class, the minorities, women? No. They're butchering them. They're killing them. And by the way, September is the third anniversary of the assassination of Mahsa Amini, the woman, the Kurdish Iranian woman, who triggered that last revolution. They are using slices of that money to buy weapons and ballistic missiles. So we send them the money. They buy the weapons to use against us and the Israelis. That is something that your public, your audience need to understand. But more dangerous, they have earmarked some of that money, since you mentioned the influence, to have to develop influence here in America and in Europe. And people would say, how come our campuses have produced these tens of thousands of individual radicalized pro-Gaza, pro-Hamas, etc.? Well, that's the regime spending on it. How come our media is doing this and not shedding light on what is important to America? That's also the Iran deal. So this is catastrophic what happened. We send them the money, they use the money against us. They use the money against our people.
Exactly, to destabilize, just like the Soviets did, to destabilize America from within and to transform our society, which would transform how America would be perceived in the world and its power and ability to, we are the one superpower that is a free nation. We are supposed to be supporting those who fight for freedom and want to live in as free people. And we're undermining that ever since the Obama administration. And a lot of Americans would say, why? What did Obama, Biden, what did Biden-Harris, and what will Harris-Walz get from this transaction with Iran, which will continue? Okay, so firstly, day one to day 100. That's how we always look at it in America, right?
That's right.
So what are you going to do on day one, and what are you going to accomplish in the first 100 days? What is she going to do with Iran in the first 100 days?
Well, number one, as I projected before, and you and I will discuss it, they're going to claim that they are ending the war in Gaza. And to do so, they're going to be very stern, very firm. Now they don't need the American Jewish electors after that they're in the White House. They're gonna put the mother of all pressures on the Bibi Netanyahu government. They're gonna empower the opposition. It's gonna be hell on earth in Israeli politics. Now we see the appetizers. That's what they're serving.
Let's pause on that for just a moment. So they have, as I understand it, it hasn't been an announcement, of course, from the White House, but I believe they have CIA operatives in Israel, money going into Israel, maybe from the State Department, the CIA, and from NGOs to destabilize the Netanyahu government. So firstly, they always want to keep it about Netanyahu because then that could be the boogeyman. And you say, well, I'm for Israel. I'm just against Netanyahu, when I believe it's much broader that it is against Israel's sovereignty and survival. Then the Obama administration did the same thing. And I believe the Clinton administration may have done the same thing.
On a smaller scale,
Smaller scale, yes. So we talk about Russia, Russian influence, Chinese, Iranian, and every nation does do this, but we have targeted the Netanyahu administration and targeted them very, very effectively to foment this discontent during wartime in a nation like Israel, surrounded by the ring of fire of terrorist organizations and nations. And so that alone, I believe what you're saying will continue and maybe escalate the moment Harris takes office.
Absolutely. Let me try to put it in a structural way. So the goal of the regime in Tehran is to protect Hamas. That's why their lobby in the United States, the Iran deal lobby, is pressuring this administration and their friends to pressure Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire. What is the meaning of a ceasefire in the middle of the war? Imagine we land on Normandy, we are fighting the Nazis, and pressure comes, oh, ceasefire. Ceasefire, we just started against the Nazis. So that's number one. Number two, there is a pressure by the regime on the administration and our media. That's a very complex situation to, as you said exactly, portray Bibi Netanyahu as the problem, as the one individual problem. They may want to replace him with another Likud guy. So they go by graduation, first replacing Bibi Netanyahu, then replacing the Likud with a national unity cabinet. And then, as you just mentioned, yes, I understand and I hear about State Department, other agencies, but the most lethal ones are the NGOs. The NGOs basically are used to channel Iran regime, Islamic regime policy into the NGOs in the United States, which many of which have a benefit, have an interest, a financial interest. Remember, Elizabeth, that there are billions of dollars floating. It's like in the cloud, and internet. And whenever there is a need to fund maybe the demonstrations in America, violent demonstrations in America, whoop, this money come down. Election, who knows? Our agencies now are investigating and so-called, quote-unquote, Iranian involvement in our elections, not the little Russian, Chinese jokes, $10 million. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And when needed against Israel's government fighting Hamas, this money is being used. That's where the problem is. A cloud of money that nobody can count for, but then instructions will go to fund and support. And in the case of Israel, it was very clear. The majority of the demonstrators are basically coming, for the hostages, what have you. But those who are, directing them are the left wing, the far left from the United States.
Right. SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, they're a communist group. They're a radical group that wants death to America. And do you think, well, let's just go back to Kamala. I want to keep coming back to her. There's no excuse for anybody not understanding at this point that from Qatar to Iran, hundreds of millions of dollars have been funneled into our institutions of higher learning, into radical professors, and into Middle Eastern studies that are intended to influence our next generation, to radicalize them, to steer them towards anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, to flatter the Iranian regime, the Islamist regime in Iran, so that they are not, don't look at these protesters. There's nothing to see here, kind of a thing, and to support this Obama, Biden, Harris agenda with Iran, which, by the way, most Americans just don't understand because it doesn't make any sense. It does not make a sense at all. Do you think that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will continue or perhaps even increase the availability or access of Iran and Qatar to American institutions, particularly universities?
Short answer, Elizabeth, is yes, and cap. Absolutely. I spent 25 years of my academic life in the United States, which is 34 years now, focusing on the matter. And I worked with many like-minded think tanks in the 90s and after 9/11. I worked also with the 9/11 Commission, which was bipartisan, that produced all these recommendations. Every single recommendation has been countered by the Obama think tanks and then by the Biden and now Harris think tanks. So we are actually seeing a movement to reverse what we have decided as Americans after 9/11. It's that serious and the gravity is big. I can tell you one thing, that the money that has been spent on our campuses, I have been in campuses almost most of my American life. That money created a force, an organized force on campuses. And people are asking how and what, and is it overnight? It's not overnight. It's over 2 decades of work. I mean, I have written articles end of the 90s and after 9/11. So, and you said it very clearly. They appoint professors who are already radical, either jihadist or pro-jihadist. The professors control the classroom. So what do you do in a classroom? You change the mind of of these individuals who are later basically hired by the newsroom. See how it works. Control the classroom.
And they have
then
all
go
the
to
credibility because they're a professor, they have a PhD in
Yes.
this. And Middle Eastern
That's what they do.
studies have been, I've done research on this, and Middle Eastern studies as an academic, rigorous academic discipline has just is laid waste.
Yeah, but let me add one point. Yeah, I agree with you. The point is, before I forget it, that Kamala and her team have been seen, it's not like we're imagining, in meetings with these academics. They have been to organizations which actually support Hamas, support Hezbollah. They are not declaring themselves as such because it's illegal in America.
It's like Holy
It
Land
used to be illegal.
Foundation and CARE and all that.
You got
You
it
want
right.
to, they learned a lesson and they mask themselves. It's disinformation and it's propaganda.
No, totally. And instead of supporting those Muslim reformers, there are plenty of new organizations in America of Muslim reformers, like Saudi Jihad in Arizona, plenty of others. They have been completely ignored by the entire administrations of the three administrations, of two at least for now, the Obama administration, the Biden administration, and if there is a Kamala Harris administration, they have chosen their allies. And they are now, it's in the public arena, talking about who will they appoint at very strategic positions in the U.S. government, mostly in the national security apparatus. Many of them are linked to either the Muslim Brotherhood or to the Islamic regime in Iran. There are now people serving in government. You go back to last September, there were magazines and reports, Semaphore, for example. They showed us emails between senior advisors serving now in the Pentagon and other places in the administration who are exchanging emails with the senior leaders of the Islamic Republic.
I still have a question about that because that is one of, you've got your box, like a black box of nightmares, or scenarios. You just, it's the Twilight Zone note. How could it be that there are Iranian agents in the State Department or in the White House and advising President Biden and Harris, Vice President Harris? How is that possible? Why are they not in jail? Why are they not facing treason? Why are they not expelled from the United States if they are not American citizens? How does that continue, Walid?
It's a cycle. It's almost, it's not epidemic, infernal, quote unquote, cycle. In the sense, all starts in academia. This is where the administrations and bureaucracies get their advisors from, their translators from. So, for example, if you have a candidate to serve in a position in the administration, who do they ask the letters of recommendations from? Like, our politicians in general, especially in the Biden, Obama, Harris team, they don't know personally. If you ask Madame Kamala, what do you know about the Battle of 636? She wouldn't know. Unlike knowing about the American history, they would know everything. But the world history, the politics, so what do? They bring the advice of advisors. Now, it happened that these advisors are already compromised. So to get people inside our bureaucracy, you rely on a compromised element. And once inside the bureaucracy, they become the advisors. And every time there is a dossier, I'll give you the position of in the Pentagon or in our big agencies, they ask those advisors, what do you think we should do with the Houthis? And then you get an information. This is legal. They could do it legally. The illegal I was mentioning is that you are in touch with a foe, with an enemy state, or at least with a terrorist supporting state. Like I was about to tell you that some of these advisors were exchanging emails with top leaders of the Islamic Republic, which is a terror list, and asking them, I read it like everybody else, what can I do for you? They were taking instructions from the Islamic regime in Iran. That goes. The problem, let me be honest, that our opposition is not really following up thoroughly. They could have done way more. Our majority in the House should have done way more in the last, series of hearings. But that's where we are. We need a change of policy in general.
We need a change of policy. And, the Chinese woman, what's her name? Nancy something, Jean, I can't remember. She was just arrested, her and her husband in New York she's been a spy for the communist Chinese for now years. And they've been arraigned. They were arrested, I believe, in July, or their home was raided. And they sent very similar text messages to the communist Chinese or emails
Mhm.
saying, what can we do? And what they do is they subtly or not so subtly affect foreign policy. For instance, oh, I almost had a heart attack, she says, when she mentioned Taiwan, but I got in there, changed his speech, took Taiwan out because they want to influence Americans against Taiwan and for the CCP. And they're arrested. I'm just wondering why these Iranians aren't arrested.
Because of our laws and because of the little information that the media has. Like, I mean, look, you and I are in the media and have been for so long. I know how it works with the producers, with the newsroom. They need something in the cycle. If they are not personally educated about it, they may not know. I've caught many attempts by the bad guys to insert information in the general mainstream media and in any social media at this point in time. If the people who are manning the media do not understand what it is, you have to like read a book, read an article, engage, or if you are lucky enough to have a language to do so. We are weak. And those who have weakened us have started in the classroom. So let's not underestimate the power of those teachers in the classrooms from shining sea to shining sea, meaning
They
I'm
may
talking
be
about
evil,
thousands of
but they're not
classrooms.
stupid. They're evil, but they're not stupid. And they know how to manipulate Americans because it's almost as if we say, here, I'm just going to lay down America on a silver platter here. Take it. Do whatever you want with us. We're okay. I've seen translators change the word Jew to Zionist when
Mm-hmm.
Muslims,
That's an
or
example.
I call them Islamofascists, are speaking and about, slaughtering people. Well, if it's Zionist, it's okay, but the true word, not okay, but they'll change it from Jew to Zionist, giving it a rationale. I've seen when Hamas supposedly changed its charter, which it never did, neither did the PLO. That is a bald-faced lie. But when they came out with a document that was sort of a policy document, and even in Haaretz, even in Israel, translated in several places that this policy document was a covenant constitution, right? And they said Hamas changed their constitution or their covenant or their foundational documents. It had not. It was a policy document that's never been voted on. It's not constitutional. It's not foundational. So the media and translators and also professors will misinterpret words just so we are given wrong information. I'm very, very concerned about Kamala Harris. Will she continue having just in as short as possible? Will she allow the infiltration of her White House, State Department, et cetera, the entire executive branch, security services by members of the Islamic regime in Iran or those affiliated who are American citizens, and by the Islamofascists in the Sunni world? Will she continue that?
You see me smiling. It's a yellow smile, meaning, oh, come on. We know exactly what the Kamala Harris team, of course, and all their workers with them are going to do. We are not duped. They're going to, first of all, go from one mothership, which is the current ongoing Iran deal, to the super Iran deal. Now, buckle up. This is not easy to digest now if it happens. They're going to normalize relationship with Tehran. Okay, so what? So, quote unquote, Iranian forces and officers and intel after the signing of a future deal will be coming here normal. It's like the officers from Canada and France and Germany and Jordan will be here, will be training in Fort Bragg, will be training in many other places.
What you're saying, because I'm fully understanding it. If they normalize relations with Iran, which you
Yeah.
believe is the next step, and we always have to remember that Kamala Harris is really just another front person for a deep state globalist um, ideology that's behind it. So Obama, Biden, Harris, Walz. Harris will just be a mouthpiece. The deep state is behind her and globalism is behind her.
Okay, so let me go to the genesis of it. Yes, there, all these forces are at the service of something.
And the
Something
UN and the World Economic Forum and all of this play into it as well, do they not?
I caught them in two things. And what you have said now is like common knowledge in the opposition. And I mean, it's not, we don't need to repeat it, but we will repeat it. But there are two things that are cementing all of this, because not everybody goes only after ideology. The Iran deal has released $150 billion up in the air. So everybody wants to have a slice. The Taliban deal will be releasing about another $100 billion. So this is even more serious than just being on the left, being on the right, or believing or not. It's really about interests that are destroying our national security. And when I mentioned the issue that, our laws will be changed, Hezbollah won't be on a terror list. So you don't need to say, well, look, there is a Hezbollah operative. They are already flying their flags in New York and Philadelphia and Los Angeles. I mean, the change is even here before Madame Kamala comes to the White House, if that happens. I am very alarmed by that, of the change that we're going to see. And I gave you 3 examples regarding the Houthis. It was done, nobody understood. This is a terror organization that Tehran funds and support. Overnight, an executive order made it into a Boy Scout organization. It's fine. It will happen to everything else.
Nobody, there wasn't a firestorm. There was probably a little tiny fire over here, and it got put out very quickly. So when they immediately delisted the Houthis, firstly, they betrayed Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
They emboldened and empowered Iran and the Houthis, who are aligned. And I guess it was part of the next step to normalizing relations with Iran. And then, of course, this Abraham Accords is ongoing, and Iran wanted to destabilize any kind of Abraham Accords from moving forward, because that would fundamentally change. Once Saudi Arabia signs the dotted line, that will fundamentally change the future of the Middle East.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share with you that I have been in the very early talks with the players of the Abraham Accord. I was an advisor, the first advisor to Donald Trump. In 2016, we already met, because we have to meet with governments and ambassadors, like every party does the same, to understand where they're going. And I heard from them, from the UAE, from the Saudis, from the Egyptians, from the Jordanians, I heard from all of them that they are waiting for a change of policy from what was an Obama policy to a Trump policy.
It relieves them, doesn't it? It also relieves them.
It does, and it's not a name. They're not attached to this name. They want a change, or they expected a change of the government. It's like the same when you had the bad players in 2009 who actually were rooting for Obama, right? So those who are left-wing, those who are pro-Muslim Brotherhood during the elections of 2008, who do you think they rooted for? Who do you think they wanted? Obama, obviously. So it's a normal game. But what I'm trying to say right now is that what will happen if there is a change of presidency to the advantage of the same team, the Obama team, meaning Kamala Harris? What will happen is earthquakes are going to happen in front of our own eyes, and that will be called change of policy. Imagine that we will see a table with the Israeli government and Hamas, and we will be moderating in the middle and pressuring the Israelis, well, you have to get out of Gaza, and well, you have to accept.
How would they rationalize? I'm not disbelieving you, because with the Houthi thing, that's nuts. That was crazy, because I think it so compromised our legitimacy in the world. Because you know what, if your enemy at least is honorable in his behaviors and actions, to be a consistent enemy, you can at least rely on your enemy to be understandable. But when you're looking at your enemy and their friends to say Saudi Arabia, Israel, Jordan, but then they betray any of those parties, then the friends are alienated and the enemies
Mhm.
can't take you seriously and they think you're compromised. So it introduces chaos into
Oh,
the region.
absolutely. Absolutely. Let me give you a real example from history because I teach Middle East history. There's a big difference between trying to fix something between Hamas and Israel, force it, or Hezbollah and or Assad, and the Camp David agreement under the late President Anwar Sadat. Egypt fought three huge wars. They lost tens of thousands of people in the war against Israel. But it's honorable. The peace that was signed was honorable. Sadat came to Israel, addressed the Knesset. He changed his policy. He kicked out the Soviet advisors. He was also moving against the Muslim Brotherhood. So with such a change, what you need is a change in the other camp. Of course, you can sit down. Of course, the Israelis gave 99% of Sinai back and then gave the last 1% at the end of the operation. That is peace. That's the beginning of peace. But if you're going to sit down with Hamas that doesn't change its charter,
That
if you sit down with
slaughters, no, it doesn't, it lies about
yeah,
not changing his starter and then it executes, well, the whole thing is insane. But then to be in the middle of hostage and ceasefire talks and slaughter six innocent
yeah,
civilians was should tell you everything. But the very next day or that day, Harris and Walls and Biden, I can't remember which one spoke and which one did not, but they were all either not offering support for Israel or sort of blaming Netanyahu for the problem or not
blaming
speak.
Netanyahu and dodging the questions. I
Right,
mean,
dodging the question. I think Walls just walked away.
exactly that will be the policy.
So you really believe that if, I don't know why I find this hard to believe given history, but you really believe that the intention of Kamala Harris uh, and the regime behind her, the deep state, would be to normalize relations with Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and perhaps Houthis. And is this intended to bring down Israel? To weaken Israel? Because I think there's some ego here too. Who are you, little Israel, to tell America what, or to be independent and not be subservient or servile to us? I don't think they like that at all either. But do they want to the destruction of Israel or to maybe bring it down to this?
Yeah, shrink it, to shrink the influence of Israel as a model for other Arabs. They want to control everything in the region. And whomever is against that control basically has to be, has to be weakened and shrunk. Now, of course, you mentioned the Abraham Accord. The Abraham Accords are really the product of two parties, and we are only the third. Israel wanted to seek peace from day one, from 1947. That's their goal. The Arabs evolved many reformists in the elites and in the non-elites, like in Saudi, Egypt, elsewhere. They were fighting the most extreme, and they came to the conclusion, like the UAE was the first one. I heard it from their leaders, and the Saudi leaders told me that we want peace at the end of the day with the Israelis because they are threatened by the bad guys. So they came together. They needed one third player, which is the United States. And I was well placed at the time, 2016, as an advisor, to understand that, of course, a Trump administration backed by a majority in Congress will come, and they did it. They created the Abraham Accord. The problem that I see is that Tehran will not accept the Abraham Accord. And what the architects here of a supposed Kamala Harris administration would say, well, that's the past. Now let's bring another big agreement, bring the Islamic Republic and the Arabs and a new government in Israel
The
and
Ishmael
ourselves,
Accords,
the whatever accords, I don't know, with the Jihad Accord, the
the Jihad
Neo-Jihad Accord.
Accords, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, does Kamala Harris, I remember when she was talking about Ramallah and she said, I've studied the maps. And as if like, in other words, you can't, I know, because I understand, military strategy and, boots on the ground. I've been there. No, she says, I've studied the maps and you cannot go into Ramallah. And I think that might have been tied with a sentence or a comment about withholding arms. I can't recall that part. But she said, you can't go into Ramallah because I've studied the maps. And from my observations of Kamala Harris, and you probably being on X have seen 1,000 times those clips of Kamala Harris sounding either revolutionary, woke, um, Marxist, whatever, scary in that one respect, authoritarian, or just ignorant, just dumb. And, I study the Middle East a lot, mostly from the perspective of Israel. That's my focus. But there's a lot of moving parts. It is one of the most complex um, conflicts, the Israel-Arab conflict, but also then if you go to the wider um, history, and you have to go all the way back to at least Muhammad and the original caliphs to really understand, the caliphates, to really understand what has happened in that region. You have to understand World War One. You have to understand the Ottoman Empire. You have to understand Europe. You have to understand empire. I love how you named your book. Subtitle,
Imperialist Republic,
yes, the
Iran, an
Imperialist
imperialist.
Republic, because Americans actually take the bait and believe that uh, settler colonialism, imperialism, all
Mhm.
this garbage, which is really just like a brainwashing propaganda thing. The, um, all of the empires began in the Middle East. The
Yeah.
Middle East has been governed by one empire or the other, and North Africa for millennia. And here,
Mhm.
Iran, which is carrying on that tradition, Israel has never been an imperial project. And Iran is truly the empire strikes back, or the imperialist, colonial imperialist, or settler colonial, whatever you want to call it. They're the empire that is attempting to expand. They've got their people. Their regime is in Lebanon. It's in Syria. It's in Iraq. It's in Yemen. It's in, well, Iran, of course. I'm not sure anywhere else. Well, Gaza. And they've got even people in Judea and Samaria.
And,
So,
and Iraq, and Iraq.
and Iraq. So
Mm.
tell me a little bit about Kamala. Does she understand the nuances of the Middle East, of its history, of its political and religious foundational ideologies and worldviews?
Elizabeth, if I'm making the statement that a majority in the Middle East studies teaching body, that's the top people with PhDs, barely understand or wrongly understand the dynamics of the Middle East, do not realize that even Iran as a nation, with many wonderful people, have been colonized by the Khomeinis, by the equivalent of the caliphate in the Sunni. There is a system inside Iran that was established after the caliphates, after the 7th century, and with settlers, with people who became jihad. They don't understand that. How can they explain even Iran to everybody else? How can they explain the caliphate to everybody else? Now you're going to tell me the recipient of that opinion, all the way up in our federal government, all the way to the Oval Office, if those who are advising them don't know it, what are you going to do about decision makers? That's why I am very concerned. They are at the mercy of this network that is funded by our enemies. You see the equation? The enemies fund those who take care of our minds, and our minds are advising our decision makers. So this is a war of ideas that we have been losing for many, many years. And it's really the era of Obama, Biden, and now, hopefully not, but it could become also the Kamala administration. That's why I am very concerned about this war of ideas. And by the way, in terms of empires and nations, every nation tried to be a little bit expansive, wanted to expand, and every empire shrunk to a national. arguing with this. What I'm saying is do not lie. Do not say, and I wrote an article, by the way, I would be happy to send it to your show with my co-host in my podcast, Giselle Sharman, about those components of ancient Israel before the Arab invasion, right? And in those components, everything shows that there was a Hebrew population. Now, there were some Philistines, Canaanites, and, my ancestors are the Canaanites, so I'm not arguing for or against.
Oh, yeah, because Canaanites went up to Lebanon.
Actually, they went from Lebanon to ancient Israel and then back to Lebanon.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes.
Do you call yourself a Phoenician?
I am a Phoenician. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. I am multi-layers like Phoenicians. Everybody else.
Yeah, Phoenicians.
But
wait a minute. Let me go back to one thing. I love the whole Phoenician thing. It's so romantic. Phoenicians. Anyway, I don't know why, but so Kamala obviously doesn't know a granular history of the Middle East. A lot of people, most people probably don't. And her advisors will be the very Islamist or Islamic regime advisors, or those who have affinity for them in her future administration, should we be cursed. And but I want to take it beyond that. Most presidents don't have, I know Obama didn't have a deep, deep understanding of geopolitical strategies and history and philosophy and theology and all the things that culture. I don't think he had a deep intellectual understanding of the Middle East that way. But let's take it beyond that. Just the average intelligent president of the United States having a good handle on things, but not being a Middle Eastern expert. That's why they have to have experts and military experts and diplomacy experts. Kamala Harris would be dealing with Russia, Communist China with Taiwan, Russia with Ukraine and NATO and the EU. Of course, North Korea. I'm a lot less worried about North Korea but Africa. There are so many hotspots in the world. And then, of course, the Middle East. Does Kamala Harris have the will? Because I get the impression that she's rather lazy, that she goes into meetings and she's given assignments that she doesn't complete. She comes to interviews and she's not properly prepared. So is she the one who would take the bull by the horns internationally, understand it, study it, and really be able to have a coherent policy? Or would she be dumb and just get dragged along by whatever advisor catches her eye or her ear?
Well, or both. Let me say a couple things before I just try to opine on the question. President Obama had a better narrative, both than Biden and Kamala. That's everybody knows. In my view, he's on the other side, but he had the capacity of the narrative, the speech. He understood more or less the past 100 years. But even those 100 years, right, they were explained to him in the colleges he attended, the organizations he was in touch with which basically I call them woko jihadists, meaning a kind of a stream from the neo-left, and then the Islamists, both the Brotherhood, but mostly the Khomeini. So he had that vision of the world. And he spoke it well. I mean, you had the impression that he understood it. Kamala Harris is different. Even if you go back 4, 5, 12 years, you won't see in her history what we saw from Obama. Obama used to go to the communist meetings, used to go to the progressive, quote unquote, ones, and deliver speeches, right? We disagree with them, but at least there was, here we don't know. We don't know because we never heard Madam Vice President right now speaking about those issues, except going in front of NGOs that are radical and saying, I am with you. So that's a third grader understanding. I am with you. So whatever you are saying, I am endorsing you. And most of these were on the wrong side. So that will be my concern. It will be an Obama minus 100 years of historians trying to explain. And you ask me, what would she do? The more complex these issues are and will be, the more reliant she would be.
Are we going to have a third world war?
I think we have started it, but it won't look like the first and the second. It's basically even more. It's smarter. They're going to take us from the inside. That's what basically they want to do.
We
They're
haven't even
gonna.
touched on the border. Let's
Oh, we haven't even
jump to
touched on the
that.
border.
That's crazy. We're having so much fun going so many different directions. It's hard to keep up. The border is probably the greatest national security threat we have had in I don't know how many decades. I can't imagine anything other than Mexicans. You know, the gotaways, the catch and release, the terrorists, the people from 140, speaking 140, I think, different languages,
Languages, yeah.
and coming from Africa, Middle East, communist China. They don't let anybody out unless that it's intentional. What is your prediction for what that open border of the last 3.5, 4 years is going to do, and what will Kamala Harris do about the border? Now she said she wants a wall. So what is she going to do to still achieve her ends? Throw up a wall here or there? And when is our next catastrophic terror attack?
You know, in the last 40 days, as I mentioned earlier to you, whatever she's saying, if it's not backed by whatever she said before, the previous 4 or 8 years, you know, I will disregard it because we want to see really policy. So here's a problem for me. Everything you mentioned, Elizabeth, is true. Catch and release and not stopping them and all that debate. Bottom line, we got millions crossing that border. I am more concerned about the power of these radical regimes and radical organizations who are on the outside, who funded and organized this offensive against our border, their capacity to influence the millions who are already in. Forget about those who are coming later. That's another problem. Of course, our border was dismantled, but let's imagine, look at the demonstrations now. That's the only evidence that we can see on TV. Thousands and thousands of people having the flags of Hezbollah, Hamas, all the other organizations, and the jihadis and ISIS, right? So we can see them. Many of them most likely are part of this illegal process going in. So now I would be concerned if Hamas can give an order from overseas to their people inside the United States, if Tehran will give the orders, if the Taliban would give the orders, China, if you want, they could use it as well. That is my concern. They are already inside. And we've seen a series of incidents, unbelievable of incidents in Colorado, in Seattle, in New York, of individual, radicalized illegal migrants using violence. And the way we are dealing with the violence that we already see is not really tranquilizing to the population. So I see that the problem is already inside. What a Kamala administration would do, number one, she will legalize those who are on the inside. It's like what they're going to do with Hamas and Hezbollah. Yeah, they're going to have them here. So we'll be dealing with a tranche of American citizens, right, who came illegally, who can now buy weapons, who could do anything, and